Hi, and welcome to episode 270 of the Untethered Podcast. Quick disclaimer, all information, content, and material of this podcast are the opinions of the speakers and is for the informational purpose only and not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified healthcare provider. Welcome to the Untethered Podcast. I am your host, Hallie Bulkin. I'm a certified myofunctional therapist, feeding specialist, podcaster, business owner, and mentor. This podcast is all about getting your questions answered and collaborating with colleagues to bring you the most up-to-date information in the orofacial myofunctional therapy, airway, tethered oral tissue, and pediatric feeding therapy space. If you're new here, I challenge you to keep an open mind and join my mission to spread this message far and wide. If you've been around since June 2019, thanks for being a loyal listener. As we jump into today's episode, remember to listen with correct oral rest posture. Tongue up, lips closed, teeth apart, breathe through your nose. Let's get started. So it is your host, Hallie, and today we are going to be talking about my journey. My journey through life as a college student, into grad school student, into SLP in the field, and through my CF, into the SLP world. When I quit being an SLP, and why I returned to it when I worked for a private practice, almost partnered with them, but then went out on my own. In the meantime, I also tried to launch an online business before starting my private practice. That failed. That was back in 2014. And then, or maybe that was 2015. I just was looking at that actually. So I'm gonna look that up and confirm. I want to confirm the timeline on that because I thought it was 2015, but then I'm like, I started my practice in 2014. So maybe the practice had already started. Anywho, that's neither here nor there at the moment, right? Fast forward, right? I decided to launch an online business, started a podcast, and launched an online business. Pandemic happens. I move states and generate this big successful online business. And now I have another online business, right? So let's dive in to the nitty gritty, all the good stuff, and talk about, I'm going to share more details about this journey along the way. But also one of the big themes that I really wanted to dive into today was sort of like how my identity as a human, like Hallie, right? And as a speech pathologist, as a student to CF, to speak, fully licensed speech pathologist, to business owner, to online business owner, like how my identity has shifted throughout that. And some of the things, I'll just share some of the things that I've learned along the way, right? Some people are like, what is your story? Like, tell us about it, because we know Instagram is a highlight reel, right? We know Facebook is a highlight reel. So let's talk good stuff. Now, before we jump in, I do need to tell you that the doors to the Myo membership are open right now. So if you're listening to this on June 3rd, 2024, when it launches, or the week of June 3rd through 7th, the doors to www.themyomembership.com are now open, and the Myo membership is your online virtual study club for all things myo, airway, and tethered oral tissues. So I'm not going to belabor it. I'm not going to go into too much detail other than to say that we have a new training every month. We give you research reviews. We've got libraries of past ones. We've got libraries of case studies. We do new case studies every month. We have weekly office hours, 24/7 Q&A wall with a panel, a team of, expert myotherapists who are in there answering your questions and talking to you about your cases and everything. We've got marketing materials, business trainings. I mean, this is such a wealth of information. So go to www.themyomembership.com, take a look for yourself, dive in, and reach out to us if you have any questions. Okay, so let's talk. The history of all things Hallie. So I graduated high school in 2003 and went to the University of Maryland for college. When I went to college, I did not know that I wanted to be a speech pathologist. I did know that I wanted to be a business owner, and I knew that that was going to happen. I didn't know in what shape yet. At one point in time, I thought, oh, maybe I'll take over my dad's business, but I don't know, something about that just didn't excite me. And so I never really fully committed to that. I was like, I just know that I'm going to own a business. I'm going to run a business. Right. And I had different models. Both my mom and my dad had businesses. And so two entrepreneurs doing different things that, I had the ability to see as a child. I also worked for an event planner, and that gave me some really good insights into what it looked like to run a business and deal with clients of various different, levels of financial means and expectations and all other fun things. We were doing like bar and bat mitzvahs and weddings. And I was always taught that the client should never know that there's an issue, right? If you're doing your job well, you're putting out the fires before anyone else ever knew there was a fire. And I was like, okay. It was very stressful when I was growing up. But then I went to grad school, and when I came back to work some weddings and bar and bat mitzvahs, I was like, this is such a break from grad school and life. I love it. But it's a very taxing job. I do not envy event planners. They give up their weekends. They are literally, it's a physically demanding job, and it is a emotionally and mentally demanding job, because you are literally on your feet all day for long events. You're dealing with a lot of people. It's just a lot. It's a lot, right? But it taught me a lot too. And by the end of high school, I was actually, I had an internship. So I was leaving every day. I was going to my internship in her home-based office, which is always what attracted to me to having a business where I could work from home that made me really good money, right? But I also was managing the independent contractors. I was managing things related to making sure we had their 1099s ready, and making sure that, we were basically setting up everybody's pay for each event. And sometimes I was the one who was handing out the pay. And, I think that really educated me on what an independent contractor was at a young age. Because up until that point, I only ever knew people worked for people. And that model in my brain would have been more aligned with an employee model, which is basically what I was when I graduated from grad school and went to work for the schools, right? So, all right, fast forward back, or rewind back, or wherever we are, to college. I start in the business classes, and I think at a certain point I was like, I don't like these classes. I don't need these classes to own a business and be successful. What do I want to do? What else do I want to do, right? I know I'll own a business one day, but this is not it. And quite honestly, it was very highly related to the fact that at that point in time, I also got around 19, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And they said to me, when I went for testing, they literally said, this woman, I guess she was I don't know, is it neuropsych maybe that assessed me? She said, well, your IQ is really high, but you have the inattentiveness, distractibility, whatever it was that she was saying. So you're a candidate for Ritalin, but I wouldn't really label you with ADD. And I was like, huh? Okay. I was like, all right, well, whatever's going to help, whatever you're suggesting, right? That's why I'm here. So I did take Ritalin. Now, before this, and the reason why I went for this testing my freshman year of college during winter break was because I'd always been an A, B student, a good student, right? Growing up. I got to college and I got my first C in a class, and I was like, what is happening? And I remember going and taking a test in one of my business classes where I basically was so distraught over getting 15 wrong on this test that I had been in class for, taken notes for, studied, right? Okay, now granted, I was partying and studied the night before, but I still studied. And I go back to the teacher and I'm like, can I just review? Can I come in and review what I got wrong? So without studying for this is a couple weeks later, without even studying, without rereading the material, without, we've moved on from that material, right, in class. I look at it and I know the correct answer to 13 out of the 15 I got wrong. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I haven't looked at this material in since before the test. Why is it that outside of the test, I know the answers, right? And so this is kind of where I was like, okay, now I'm confused because this happened twice. That one time that really stands out in my mind. And I was like, maybe I'm not a good test taker. I don't know. So I did find out that I had some test taking anxiety, and really just, test taking was not my number one best skill, I guess you could say. But when they gave me Ritalin and I started taking the Ritalin to study, to take tests, to attend classes, to take notes, I could see a major difference in like how I took notes, what was written on the paper, and that directly correlated to the information I was studying, right? Which then helped me improve my performance on tests. I also taught myself different ways of studying, right? So there was a behavioral component to this where I started chunking my studying. I rewrote all of my notes on note cards. So I studied differently. I'm not just going to write this all off to like I took medicine and all was good. No, I did learn how to study. That was something that was missing from my high school years, apparently. But I think it's very interesting because it also just helped to shape like who I am. And I started to recognize like there were certain things that didn't come easily to me, but I never really realized that that was different, that others didn't experience the same things, right? Until I went through this experience. Now, at the same time, I volunteered in a clinic with children who, many of which were on the spectrum. And this was a clinic that was run through the university. And I just fell in love with these kids. And I had like one that I was paired with in particular who did not communicate very much with the family, you know, at least through, that was the family's concern, was like, they're not communicating, they're not, our child's not interacting with us. And so I just wanted to create these like interactive, like fun moments, right? And so I was able to do that. And I was like, this feels very natural to me. I don't know why it feels so natural, but like being able to connect with this young child in a way where the child, like we're kind of having this back and forth interaction without even using words, right? Without using verbal or nonverbal words. It was just sort of like this, like we could look at each other and be connected kind of thing. It was very interesting, right? I was like, okay, that's interesting, right? And then that evolved into me learning that my aunt was a speech pathologist. Why I never knew that, don't know. She had her own business too. And I went and they ran these little like social language groups at a private school in Potomac, Maryland. And I went and started helping out, just like volunteering there in the afternoons. Once or twice a week for maybe a semester. And then I think I went back at one point and did it again. But I loved it. I loved being with the kids. It was done with an OT and a PT as well. And then I think the second round was just OT. But it was really a very cool experience to see the impact they were making on these children's lives. And I was like, that's it. Like I found my calling. Now, in the meantime, I switched from being a business major to being an education major to going, I don't actually want to be a teacher because I don't think I could be in the same classroom every day. Like I would get bored. Like I need challenge. I need to, not to say that it's not challenging to teach kids. It's very challenging. And I'm going to share more in a moment. So stick with me here. But I was kind of just like, I need to be like moving around. I need to be constantly challenged. Like, I don't want to be in the same room with the same kids every day. Okay, that's just me. I'm not throwing any shade. That's just me. So joke's on me. I'll tell you why in a second. So then I find psychology and I consider moving like into like psychology. So I'm like, that could be a way to work with children, right? And then I stumbled upon speech pathology. And at that point I was like, sold. I took my like communication 101 course. No, it wasn't. That was a different course. It may have just been like hearing and speech sciences 101 or whatever that course was. And I fell in love. And I was like, wow, this is a really cool profession. I'm in, like sold, right? So I enrolled. This is now my sophomore year, maybe towards the end or so. And so because of maybe it was second semester sophomore year, but because of when I entered in, I also did not like consider studying abroad because that would have meant I would have stayed an extra semester in college to get all of my requirements done because I switched my major 3 times, which is what they tell everybody you're going to do. Kids change their majors 3 times on average. I said, no, not me. Yeah, I did. Fast forward to grad school, right? So I ended up finishing out college with like straight A's and then got straight A's all the way through grad school. Thank you, Ritalin. Hated myself on it, but it did serve a purpose. And before grad school, I signed a contract that the school would pay for my tuition and books and, stuff like that in exchange for me signing an agreement to come work for them for 3 years. Never wanted to work in the schools, but it felt like a really silly thing to turn down. So I took it. I signed it. They accepted it. I graduated. I went to work in the schools for 3 years. I was miserable. Like I would cry all the time. My third year, I did end up in Montgomery County Infants and Toddlers. And I loved that because I was working one-on-one, but I did not love that it was only a parent coaching model, was a parent coaching model. It was like not a medical model, even though we were working with feeding kids and medically complex kiddos sometimes. And then they were like, okay, now we're bagless therapists. Like you can't take your bags into therapy. And I was over here going like, don't tell me what to do. Some of these families, I'm walking into their homes and they don't want their children to bang on their pots and pans when they have one set of pots and pans to use. So like I would go and I would buy toys from like the dollar store or from Goodwill or from, there was this cute little place called Kid to Kid where people like sold, their old toys and stuff. And I would leave them with the families. And if I never saw them again, it was fine. Right. But the idea was like, if I could bring some things into their home where they can play with their child and they can elicit some speech language communication, these are for those cases, obviously different for feeding. But if I can do that, I'm happy to leave those materials there. And if someone has a problem with that, like come at me, come at me. So I left the schools because there were a lot of things they told me I could not do that I am licensed to do. And that just didn't sit well with me. I don't like being told what I can and can't do. And honestly, at this point, I'd gotten into network marketing. I was a Beachbody coach. I replaced my income in the school. So I left and I quit being a speech pathologist for about 8 months. And it was around the 8-month point where I was just like, or maybe 6-7 months in, I was like, I really miss the kids. I really, really miss the kids. It's sort of like I had this like identity crisis of like, I worked hard to become a speech pathologist and I really I still want to do that. I just wanted to look different than what I was doing. So I did go to work for a private practice where we were traveling to the kids like preschools, daycares, homes and everything, working one-on-one. I had free reign to be the therapist I wanted to be, which I freaking loved. And almost partnered with that individual. We actually did for a little bit, but then quickly went on our own separate ways. That's neither here nor there in that conversation. But what I will say was that's the point where I shifted from being like an employee to not an SLP at all, right? To an independent contractor, to a business partner, to a business owner, owning my own thing. And June 1st, 2014 is when I opened my private practice, right? That's a lot of identity shifts in a short period of time. So I graduated in 2019. Oh my goodness, 2009. Just over here, dropping my age by 10 years. It's fine. Anyways, so private practice was great for me. I went from like 0 to 6 figures in 8 months. I hired my first contractor when demand basically, required it. People were saying, I want after school hours. And I was like, I'm working like 8 to 2:30 and I want to be home by 3. Like it's a long day for me already. And I'm driving in between patients. So yeah, no, I'm not doing after school hours. So instead, I basically brought in a contractor who was working in the schools and who wanted those after school hours and could see those patients in the afternoons. And so that worked out really well. Quickly got pregnant. So I remember I launched this June 1, 2014, got pregnant like towards the end of November of that year and had my first child in August of 2015, just about 14 months after launching my practice, or almost 15 months. So anyways, fast forward, and I guess that was about the time I said I was going to look this up while I was talking, and clearly I did not. I wanted to look up the name of this like mastermind thing that I did to see like what year it was that I did it. And I can tell you exactly when it was. So, this was not in 2014. So I started the private practice first. I think I was like a couple years in to the private practice and I was doing like little videos on YouTube. And then once I had, Lily, my first child, I was doing some videos with her in the background and sometimes she was even in them. But it wasn't until around let me see. I did do some private consulting actually. And I'm trying to remember at what point I joined. Here we go. Okay, so November 4th, 2015 is when I joined this mastermind program that basically started at the end of that year, like beginning of 2016, sorry. So 2016 is when I believe I attempted to launch my first online business. I had this amazing course. I think it was amazing. I still think it's amazing. It's probably still very relevant. Honestly, I should probably just put it out there for free at this point. But I created this course where I taught parents how to advocate for their children in IEP meetings. And it was like made so simple for them, like so much gold in that training. Because when I worked in the schools, I was taught how to withhold this, how not to give out too much information, how not to ultimately give these kids what they deserved, and how to combat parents, and how to like, you know, reference like pages of manuals of the Goldman Fristo or other things that like to like have an argument against why we could give something, because we couldn't say, oh, we don't have the funding for that, or oh, we don't have the staffing for that. That's illegal. But we could say other things. So anyways, once I had my own private practice, I was on the other side of the table, now using all of my skills to help families get every single thing that I believe their child deserved on that IEP. Everything they needed and deserved. And I was very proud of that. Very, very proud of that. It was very fulfilling, because that's just one of the reasons why I just didn't, when I said the joke's on me, it's like I ended up working in the schools and, you know, getting paid a teacher's salary. I was in the closet of a preschool classroom where the door did not close because my desk was up against it, because literally it was a closet. Like maintenance came and took the 3 shelves off the wall and pushed in a filing cabinet for me, pushed in a desk, and the door didn't close. So imagine like your office being in a preschool classroom in a public school setting. It was just, it didn't work for me. I was also split between 2 schools, and I had like 52 kids on my caseload, which sounds low for a caseload, but if they're only there 4 mornings a week, and you can't pull them from lunch or specials or breakfast, so you literally have 30 minutes a day that you can see them, but they have 60 to 90 minutes of speech on their IEP. Like, how are we doing this? Tell me. Oh, and I was only at that school 2 days a week because my time was split between 2 preschool programs. So that's why the joke was on me. Anyways, fast forwarding again, right? So I ended up getting out of the whole network marketing thing. I had residual checks coming in for a while, but I did not pursue it after a couple of years. Made good money. It allowed me to leave my job. So I'm very grateful for that. But I just got really tired of adults being really whiny about like wanting to make money and lose weight, but nobody wanted to put in the work. Went to another company, thought it was the company I was at and the culture there and the payment plan and blah, blah, blah. It was some of that, but also it was not that much better at the next place, which I also had a lot of success with at the next company that I went to. But yeah, I was like, network marketing is not for me. And I'm out. I was like, this is not actually working for yourself, especially if someone could just take something away from you overnight, which we see happen over and over again with different companies. I was like, I want to build for myself, right? So that's where 2014 launched my private practice. 2016 tried to launch the online business, except for that online business crashed and burned because I try to do it all myself. Okay. So I now have another podcast called the Online Medical Entrepreneur Podcast. And I actually just recorded an episode for that that'll be out probably within a couple weeks of this one, that talks about, you know, hiring an ads team and how to know when to hire and who to hire and what to hire for and all those different things, because that is what I did not do. That's what I failed to do in 2016. So here I am, as you know, I've got this identity of very successful private practice owner, but could not seem to like inch my way into the online world. It just wasn't working. Meanwhile, I was mentoring one-on-one private practice owners because people were just seeking me out to teach them like how I went from 0 to 6 figures so quickly. Like, could I help them do that? And so I've now helped numerous SLP business owners do exactly that. And that's a big passion of mine. I've talked at symposiums about it. I've given trainings on it. I love, you know, online conferences, all kinds of things. I love business. Like, I eat, sleep, and breathe business. It's just like, it's very second nature to me. But anywho, failed at that first attempt in online business. And that was again in 2016. And that froze me in my tracks for about 3 years, because it wasn't until I was, let's fast forward to 2018. And I asked a good friend and colleague of mine, I said, hey, what's that program you were doing? You were talking about, it sounds really interesting. And she tells me, you know, what program she's doing. So I go and I do this program, and I get into it and I think like, okay, this is going to really help me with my business. And like, I want to go at that whole like online business thing again. Right. This is December 2018. I sign up and I realize, oh my gosh, I got to work on myself. Right. Through that course, I realized like I was stuck in this identity of like a perfectionist and an overdoer and a people pleaser and like all these different things. I cared what everybody thought about me. And I don't mean that like in a, when I say like now I don't care, it's not an ego thing. We'll talk about that. It's more of an identity thing. But the point is, I worked for 12 weeks on myself. I was a changed person. And then I shifted from there into working on creating the business that I desired. And so, enter spring 2019. I'm like, I don't know what course I want, but I know I want to launch a course. Okay. We know that much, right? So I buy a course on how to do all this. I'm like, I'm going to watch the whole thing. I'm going to go to the live event in the fall. I'm going to watch the whole thing. I bought this in the summer of 2019. I'm going to watch the whole thing before I go. Yeah. Okay. So I launched this podcast, right? This one that you're listening to, Untethered Podcast, in summer of 2019. And it didn't exist, right? So like, I'm like in true Hallie fashion, I had to create that podcast because I went to look for it and there was no podcast that just focused on like myo, airway, and TOTS. Like there were individual episodes, but no like dedicated podcasts. And so my business mentor was like, do it. That's kind of like a wide blue open ocean. I was like, all right, let's go. Which did position me really well because that's how people started to find me because nobody knew who I was before that. So fast forward to the fall, I go to this event, I get really clear. We'll actually back up a little bit. August, September-ish, I'm like, all right, I know I'm going to this event in October. I'm going to come back and we're going to hit the ground running because I'll get really clear on like what it is I want to do, like which course I'm going to do first. And a good colleague and friend of mine, Teresa Richards, if any of you know her, basically was like, Hallie, we really need a solid, comprehensive pediatric feeding course. And I was like, I know. I wish I had that myself when I was getting started in feeding. She was like, yeah, like we were talking. It's like, that doesn't exist. And at first I was like, this seems like a really big job. Like, I don't think I'm here for it. And she kind of was like, I'm going to tell someone else, I'll just go talk to somebody else. I was like, nope, wait. Let me sleep on it. Right. I come back the next day. I'm like, all right, let's do this. But it felt scary, right? There was some fear around that because I recognized that like, I didn't know there was everything. I didn't know everything there was to know about pediatric feeding. Like I myself specialized in working with tethered oral tissue cases and, airway, like, but more upper airway, not so much lower airway. And, these kids who are struggling to feed, but mostly over the age of 1. So not these breastfeeding, bottle feeding babies, but these kids who have already transitioned to solids and who are, who've always been really picky or who have become more picky and are like selective and they're eliminating more foods. And we're getting really kind of fearful of like where we're headed because we really eat very few foods now, right? Like that's who I was working with. I was like, I can teach on these cases because this is what I know, but I can't teach on what I don't know, right? So all that to say, I was always taught to kind of be a problem solver. And so I was like, how do we do this? I'm feeling called to do it. I'm not sure what it looks like yet. I went to this. I was like, I'm going to hire the team. So at that point, I took money from my private practice to invest in starting this new online business. I hired a marketing team and an ads team and a virtual assistant. And I was like, let's go. Like, this is what we're doing. And so we had some initial conversations, but then we really hit the ground running when I came back from this event in October of 2019. And we launched into our 90-day runway, which was basically like launching the free pediatric feeding screening packet that you all know and love. Hopefully, if you don't, what are you waiting for? Go download it. And from there, we just stayed in the inbox, in everyone's inbox every week, right? Like sharing information from the podcast, sharing other helpful information about pediatric feeding. And when we opened doors, our first course and launch and everything was March 16th, 2020, as the world shut down. Now, I had already planned for this to be a fully online course. I never had and have no intentions of this ever being taught in person because I wanted a course that was accessible. I wanted a course that was recorded. I wanted a course that you could go back to and learn from in the future if you wanted to, especially as you got different patients. I wanted everything that I felt like was missing for me and for the type of learner that I am. And I also wanted to create a critical thinking journey where you come in and you could be completely new to pediatric feeding, but by the time you leave in 12 weeks, like you have evolved. You are being a pediatric feeding therapist who can go out and assess and then create a treatment plan and start treating, right? Pediatric feeding patients, right? So I was like, who do I need to bring on the team to help me? And so I did recruit other SLPs and OTs. We had a very different team when the pandemic happened. Unfortunately, some of them had to kind of bow out because they were now not working and home with their kids. And they were like, I don't have time to create a course or teach or get on Zoom at 8 p.m. for case study calls. And I was like, that's fair, right? So I remember Ramya, who actually is one of our coeducators, she joined us at like the 11th hour. And then at that point, we also had another SLP and then Caitlin, who's our OT now. And the two of them are still with me. And it's a really beautiful course. It's amazing. I love it. We just launched it for the 14th time. Holy moly. Because I'm told most courses sizzle out after 6 to 8 online launches, but I'm like, we're still going strong. And we're creating all these pediatric feeding patients and getting these kids off of wait lists, which is my ultimate goal. But backtrack, right? So at the point of launching this, I was like, I don't have time to run an online business. Basically, I've got 2 kids at home, 2 small kids, right? This was 2020. And I had a almost 2-year-old, and actually she had just turned 2 in February of 2020, and a 4-year-old. And I was like, I don't have time to parent, to run an online business and build that online business and treat full time, right? And so I already was only treating a couple days a week, and that still felt like a lot. So I was like, I'm going to decrease it. And I had a couple of kids who basically I pulled myself out of treating with the exception of 2 cases, which moved to virtual with the pandemic. And I stuck with those cases for about a year after that, and then actually have not been treating since because I stepped into more of a mentorship and business owner role. And so, what was interesting to me was I always had this little voice in the back of my mind, like, who am I to be teaching if I'm not treating? Like, who am I to be mentoring if I'm not treating? Who am I to? And so honestly, like, I always joke, I'm kind of like, it's kind of like riding a bike. Like, I will have friends bring their kids, or someone I know has a baby. I've done this for our courses where I have somebody bring a child and I assess them. I create a treatment plan. We do a little treatment, right? And so I'm still like in it in that respect, but I'm not in the throes of the day to day. And that was a massive identity shift for me. Going, and this has even happened in the past with like certain cases that I worked on for a very long time, or schools that I went into and had relationships with. A lot of these things like shape shifted over time, where I always identified like as the private practice owner, right? And I still do, but I'm no longer the private practice owner who knows everybody's name in the private practice like I once did, right? I mean, I can see everyone in the practice, but I don't know them on the same level that I once did. Mind you, my team is also in the DC metro area. I live in South Florida, and they travel to them. So it's not like we even have like a home base where all the patients come to us and where I could like pop in when I visit Maryland and go see them all, right? So that was kind of an interesting like shift in identity, right? But then there was the shift from being a assessing and treating therapist like regularly to someone who really wasn't, and who was more like mentoring business owners and mentoring clinically and running an online business and running a private practice. And so I made this major shift to like online business owner, mentor, and podcaster, right? Mom, and all those other hats I wear too. And then I completely stopped treating at a certain point, and I was like, I'm on a sabbatical. Right. And so it's interesting now because as I talk about this, I'm like, I remember when these things all happened, but I can't even really pinpoint like every single individual feeling I had or thought I had. But I know that this is a common theme that happens as we shift in our careers, because I've talked to other dear friends and colleagues about this, even one last week. And, it's like a certain part of your identity shifts and even dies off in a sense, right? Something that you once identified so closely with is no longer how you identify. And so like today when people ask me, well, what do you do? Like, who are you, Hallie? I'm a business owner. If I'm not talking about being a mom and like family person and all that stuff, if I'm talking just like SLP business, like career kind of stuff, I'm an online business owner who mentors other business owners. Like that is really like what I've shifted into. Now, yes, do I still mentor inside my courses? Yeah, for sure. And like, do I still know all of that like the back of my hand? Yes, for sure. Right. But I've continued to evolve into someone who, yes, teaches in my own courses, but also has made a massive shift to teaching online business owners. Why? In private practice, I've mentored private practice owners as well. Why? Because that's what's lighting me up right now. And that's who keeps, I keep attracting that. I keep attracting business owners who are like, hey, can you help me like grow my private practice? Hey, can you help me move into the online space like you did? Like I would love to generate a couple extra $1,000 a month, or I would love to go from 0 to 6 figures with an online course. Can you help me do that? Like, yeah, I've done that multiple times. I can help you do that too. Right. So the reason why I even wanted to do an episode on this and share my journey was because it has not always been like butterfly and rainbows. And, I had this interesting situation where I have a therapist who's in a program, and this program is like shifting their model, and they basically want to hire this therapist like in-house and like whatever, that's fine. They also wanted to take all of our clients. And I was like, that's not fine. Like no to that. Interesting story that we'll leave for another day, or we won't discuss for reasons of just me being a good human. But it really made me stop in my tracks, because I was like, wow, like the person who I spoke to said something to me that really stood out. And she was like, Hallie, I mean, like, how are you doing? Everything going well? And I'm like, yeah, things are going well. Like I wasn't going to get into like the nitty gritty of like, I might have to serve a lawsuit to this company who's trying to steal my registered trademark. And then there's this one who's trying to also use my trademark in her business. And my attorney's working on both those cases. I mean, like what, am I going to get into all these nitty gritty things that happen on this just life of a business owner? Okay. Be prepared that when you do grow a business, people are going to want what you have. And sometimes they just try to take it from you. Sometimes it's not worth minding any business towards it or attention or time. And some other times you're like, well, this could really cause a huge problem, a big financial problem, because like if you're trying to, take my certification, my CMT, my certified myofunctional therapist, right? No AOMT, you can't have that. That belongs to me. And that is something I can say legally because they have it on their website, and that is my mark. And I have certified myofunctional therapists already that have it. So, anyways, I won't go into like what steps we're taking at the moment, but this has been going on for a few years. So don't be confused. No, they do not give the CMT. That is through my company and my company only. But it's not all butterflies and rainbows. And this individual said to me, they're like, well, everything you touch, Hallie, turns to gold. I was like, that's the perception, isn't it? I was like, amazing. All right. Well, that is the highlight. That's the Instagram highlight reel that we all talk about. What you see on the outside, or the snippets you see of someone else's business or someone else's life here and there, is not typically the reality, right? That's just what they're sharing, or just what you happen to see based on the information that you've fielded on any given day or number of days, right? Or what they're, right? Like what I said, what they're choosing to share. So again, I wanted to do this episode because I think it's important to honor where you are now, honor where you may want to be in the future. Like none of us are stuck where we are. We all have the ability to shift into another role. I am a person that really, I value relationships with colleagues, with friends, family. But when you lose my trust for doing something super duper shady or something super duper unkosher, I'm an Enneagram 8. If you know anything, it's sort of like, I will be your biggest cheerleader. Even if you're my competition, I will be your biggest cheerleader until you try to cut me off at the knees, and then you are dead to me. Real talk. Oh my goodness. Yeah. One of my dear friends and colleagues, Autumn Reed Henning, and I talk about these things all the time because we're very, very similar people. And I think that it is just fascinating. It's fascinating to see how there are some really good humans out there, right? Who will come to you and say, hey, can you mentor me? Can you teach me this? And I'm like, yes, I will literally teach you what I did. And then there's others who just try to copy exactly what you did, steal and sell what they got from you. Don't recommend that. I don't recommend that. I believe in karma. I believe in like energy and stuff like that. And it's never going to serve you well. I've seen quite a few people like fail because they tried to copy me. They tried to copy several other colleagues. Not to say that you can't try to do some of the similar things that we have done, right? You can totally emulate things that you see out there, but you got to put your own personal mark on it. Like, this is me giving you free business advice. You've got to put your own energetic stamp on it, your own personality. You got to make it yours. That's why things are not going to sell if you're trying to copy and sell what someone else has created, because they did it, most likely, if they're successful, they did it based on like their own intuition, their own guidance, their own energetic stamp, right? Their own energy helped them to create that. And you don't know what level of investment, like I've invested so much time and money and energy into learning so many different things about myself to then in turn be able to figure out like what I wanted to sell, who I wanted to market to, who I wanted to attract into my business. Like, I teach this all in Online Medical Entrepreneur in my course and my other business. But man, it's fascinating, because I will tell you what hurts the most is when people who are close to you and people who are really involved in your business, or someone who's been a relationship you've had for 10 plus years, 15 years, comes to you and basically cuts you off at the knees. And sometimes they'll do it under the guise of like trying to help someone else, or, oh, well, you've been so successful. And like, you remember when you were starting out. That doesn't make it okay. You can't just, if individuals who are successful, right? Like, let's say you start a private practice and you're making a couple $100,000 a year, and a contractor or an employee comes to you and says, hey, you know what? You're really successful. So like, just give me my clients. I'm going to go. Give me my clients. Let me start my own thing, because like, you're really successful. You don't need it. That would put a business under most of the time. And I don't think that people stop and think about that, right? And this is just one example. This is true of like many, many businesses in our industry and beyond. And these can be 7 and 8 figure businesses, y'all. So when somebody kind of like puts up a boundary, or they tell you no, that's their prerogative, right? Because people want to protect what they've built. And that's not somebody being mean or nasty. That's somebody who is strong in their boundaries, who understands their identity, who is living out their truest version of themselves. And they're not typically, most people are not living out of fear at that level of business. They're typically living out of like, I worked hard to get here. I'm confident in what I've built and who I am. And no, you can't just take it from me. You can't just take it from me, right? This is why a lot of us also very, different situation, but similarly, a lot of people will come to me and say like, oh my gosh, did you see this person's post? Oh my gosh, you're spreading false information. And like, this could be true about what's going on in the world right now. This could be true about what's going on in the myo space, the tethered oral tissue space, pediatric feeding space. And I got to the point where I was like, I cannot be the Instagram police anymore. Like, it's just, look, there's plenty of other people doing it, so good on you. You can't force somebody to change. They have to want to. So the best thing we can do is open up the information, open up those conversational channels to allow for that, share information, and focus on who you do want to attract, right? And kind of like ignore the rest of the noise. And the last thing I want to leave you with today is one of the biggest lessons that I ever learned that has helped me, I think, in each phase of my identity shifts, in each phase of me questioning myself, because we all do it and it never stops. I tell you this in the 5-day free training, that like, we never stop questioning ourselves, and how some of us are questioning how good we are, like how much information we know, how well we can help our patients, so on and so forth, right? So I had a mentor who basically said to me once, you are going to be good. You're going to be judged good or bad, right? You're going to be judged good or bad. They're going to be like, Hallie, I really like your hair today, but that shirt, awful. Ugh, don't like your Jewish star necklace. Nope, that's not sitting well with me. Or like, why'd you pick those headphones? Those make your head look funny. Look, anybody could look at me right now and say any number of things, right? Good or bad. But if you are strong in your convictions, right? If you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, you have a larger vision, you have a larger mission, that you're trying to accomplish, does it even matter? If that larger mission, if your vision and mission actually plays out and you go do the thing that you're setting out to do, right? You're being that person who can go and do the things, you can have the things that you desire. At the end of the day, and you're helping people in the process, does it even matter what other people think of you? No, it doesn't. It doesn't, right? Now, all that to say, be a good human, okay? Be a good human. Don't be a crappy person. Like right now, there's this whole thing going on with Miss Rachel. And like, I have to use this example because we're literally living it right now. And many of you know I'm Jewish, right? If you don't like that, that's on you. Miss Rachel decided to partner with an organization that does not support Israeli children. And so I don't know if that was part of why she's not or what, but she basically made this video saying that she wants to help all children and all children deserve X, Y, and Z. And like, hey, look, we all agree with you, Miss Rachel, like all children. Yes. But then why did you blatantly exclude Israeli children, Jewish children in your advocacy efforts, right? That was a choice you made. And that's your choice to make, right? So when people call you out on that, because you chose to use the word all children and not just, talk about certain groups of children, you basically demean, Jewish or Israeli children, because not all Israelis are Jewish. We have, Muslim, we have Druze, we have Christian, we've got a lot of other religions, right? And identities and individuals who live in Israel that are not Jewish. So when you choose to leave out an entire section of children, an entire group of children, a nationality of children, blatantly leave them out, but you continue to reference all children, it's almost like saying all children except if they're Jewish, all children except if they're Israeli, right? And so you get called out on being anti-Semitic. And then you don't feel good about it because you got called on your shit. Excuse my French. So then you go cry crocodile tears. Then you go on Fraggle Rock and you sing a song about how you're dancing, your Fraggle Rock dancing your cares away. And I call you out on it, and others call you out on it. And there's articles written and there's canceling happening and I don't know what else, right? The biggest difference that I see, and I don't even know how we got on this topic at this point, but the biggest difference that I see is that a lot of the Jews who are advocating, especially speech pathologists, because many of us, I didn't know who Miss Rachel was, honestly, but a lot of these speech pathologists who are really, really upset over this, their kids or their patients watch Miss Rachel. And no one in their right mind would have thought she was anti-Semitic. But she has made a choice to continue after being, called out. She's continued to ignore the fact that there are Israeli children being held captive right now. There are Israeli children who are very much so in need. This was not meant to get political or anything. And this is not political. This is about children. This is not about the state of Israel. Don't come at me. When you make that choice, right, that is an identity that you choose to have and own and live with. And you dig your heels in further into the ground and really just, we're just, I remember why I got on this. She came on today. Somebody sent me this reel and she made this like reel about like, I don't care about their opinions, I think is kind of like what the message is. Like their opinions are just their opinions and I don't care about them. We're just like, that's fine. You're just furthering our evidence that you are anti-Semitic, right? And look, that's the identity she chooses to hold. But at the end of the day, right? She is being judged out the wazoo right now, good and bad. There are some people that love her for what she's doing, and there are some people that are really unhappy with her. And she's still going about it, and she's still obviously going to be very successful because she has 10 million followers online, and she's, Miss Rachel, who apparently is a big name in households. Who knew? But yeah, I wanted to bring that up because there are great examples, and then there's examples that I prefer didn't happen, but nonetheless an example of identity and who you choose to be and who you choose to show up as and and how you can move forward even when you're being judged, right? Whether I agree with her or not. So anywho, I want to wrap this up, but all that to say, hopefully my journey goes to show a little bit more of like who I am, how I got to where I am, because I think a lot of people look at me even and they just assume like, oh my gosh, like everything you try, Hallie, is so successful. Well, I mean, yeah, we have big launches and that's a lot of what we share, a lot of what you see. But there is a very hardworking team behind the scenes that makes everything look that beautiful and pretty and manicured and, you know, makes it look very successful. And that takes a lot of energy, business know-how, right? I've got a full-time COO now. I've got a handful of virtual assistants who are amazing and carry this team. I've got mentors in my programs, right? I've got an ads team. I've got a copywriter, right? We've got different individuals who all serve various roles in really each business, because this is like, I've got this in each of my businesses. And so it may look super easy and well manicured and pretty on the outside, but until you go through it and do it yourself, right? I don't think it's hard to have an understanding of what it takes and how it feels to even be the individual who is operating various businesses. So all of that to say, this is my story. This is a bit about it. I have now started another business called Online Medical Entrepreneur, where I am teaching, because I do still mentor private practice owners. I don't really advertise that a ton. It's more so when they come to me and ask, because I love doing it, but I don't want to fill my schedule with that, because I like having the freedom to do what I want during the day and work when I want, where I want. So I'm very careful with like how many things I do that tie me to the computer. There are some weeks where I may work 5 to 10 hours, and there's other weeks where I may work 20 to 30 hours. It just depends, right? And it's actually a choice that I get to make very often. But I've worked very hard to put all of this in place, right? This didn't just like appear magically overnight. I didn't have all this magical money, to start a private practice or to like everything I've ever done, I've created for myself. And I think it's important to put that out there and help others realize that, because I like nice things. I live in a nice home. I drive a nice car, right? But I do these things for myself. I'm not showy. So you might see things in the background of my videos, but I'm not doing it to be showy. I'm doing that because that's where I live. So that's my background. And it was interesting too, because I talked to somebody about this the other day, and I was just like, sometimes people like value different things, and I like nice things for myself, but I don't buy them to show them off. So like, I don't know how other people perceive my success. Sometimes it seems like there's people who feel like I'm not successful at all. And then there's some people who treat me like I am a billionaire. It's always very, very fascinating. I am not a billionaire, for what it's worth. Anywho, okay. So wrapping this up, as I've said now 3 times, I do want to remind everybody that the doors to themyomembership.com are open right now. So come and join us if that's something that interests you. If you are somebody, though, who wants help with private practice ownership, I'm considering restarting my Real Biz Mastermind for private practice owners who want to grow their private practice. So you have to have one already. It does not have to be successful or making a ton of money, but you got to have a practice. So if you're interested in that, email support@feedthepedes.com. Let us know. And then if you're someone who's like, yeah, I mean, this is all good and great, but I really want to grow an online business, email support@onlinemedicalentrepreneur.com, and we can help you out over there. All right. I hope everyone has a great day. This is just like this part of my journey. I'm sure things will continue to evolve and change and shape shift, and my identities, I'm sure, will change even more, going forward as a business owner. Because if you had asked me 10 years ago where I would be today, I would have never known that this is where I would be and that this is who I'd be being in the world. It's a very cool and exciting time, and I love everything that I'm doing. And I've learned to just lean in and trust my intuition, meaning like I follow my gut. I do the things that I feel called to do, and I don't do the things that society like expects me to do, right? I do things Hallie's way. So I also help others do the same and do things their way. And guess what? When you're aligned like that, that's when the money just it just comes to you. It flows so easily. So if that's something you desire, like I said, reach out. I'd love to help you. But yeah, this is me. This is me and my story in a nutshell. Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you found value in this episode and want to hear more of these Myo Tots airway and feeding related episodes, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and share this episode on your social media platforms. You can access free resources and all I offer at HallieBalkin.com or pop over to @HallieBalkin on Instagram to get all the latest updates.